All right, guys, if you recall from the last meeting, I gave you a real quick snapshot, some preliminary numbers. All of our hunter harvests, our reports are in. We've got some final numbers and some final stats for you folks real quick. I got about 10 slides. So obviously the Spring Canada Goose program, that's a picture there. Pretty harsh conditions in most eastern South Dakota this past April. Just to review, right there, 2012 Fish and Wildlife Service breeding estimate was 270,000 resident Canada geese. And that's what our management objective is, which we established in 2010. Currently, obviously, the population exceeds our management goals. It's really been a significant expenditure of the department, particular to the wildlife damage program. Since 2000, we've spent more than $4.3 million. So that's a significant chunk of change there. Eastern South Dakota, pretty low landowner tolerance. Again, commodity prices have been at record, and a lot of big water with a lot of geese, and more and more concern each year. The landowner, for the most part, has been pretty quiet this year so far, and last year as well. And I attribute that to the hard work that our staff does and the work that they put out there. They've been really working with our landowners a lot and doing a good job. We've also been sub-permitting landowners to kill geese on these problem areas as well. We've done that. This will be the fourth year now. That's starting to gain some traction. More and more people are starting to hear about it. I had a good report from southeastern South Dakota earlier this week that a lot of the historic complaints that they've been working on, they were able to handle just by giving that landowner basically a kill permit. And then we've also tried to increase bag limits during the August management take, early September season. We actually instituted the August management take in 2010 for the first time, so just trying some different management approaches from the last 3 years to try to curb that population growth. So that has our agency asking what's next. And that's where we brought forward you folks several months ago what we call the Spring Canada Goose program, where we utilize that Fish and Wildlife Service permit. And we went ahead and authorized the take of 7,000 birds, and we selected 140 different volunteer hunters to assist us with that. Each one of those volunteers could harvest up to 50 Canada geese per permit. Then they could also choose to have 3 people help them if they so chose. And then, of course, since this isn't a traditional hunting season, again, stipulated by the Fish and Wildlife Service, obviously they couldn't use calls, blinds, or decoys. They're pretty much limited to pass shooting and jump shooting opportunities only. And then we were also really fortunate that Sportsmen Against Hunger was willing to work with us and provide the funds to process those geese, as well as find processors that would accept those geese as well. So that component worked really well. So we ran this program for the month of April and focused in on these areas that had a long history of chronic damage, private land only. GFP prior to the season contacted these landowners, secured all the access, so that was taken care of. Those are the 6 counties that the program was in, and then we had an online registration period for 2 weeks where we had more than 1,200 folks registered for those 140 slots, so a lot of interest from sportsmen. Again, 2 different approaches, just to touch real quickly. Region 4 up in the northeast, Day County was open. Those individuals had 90 permittees plus their 3 designees, and then we provided a map. This map to them looks pretty similar to our walking area atlas of all the open areas. We had approximately 75,000 acres of private land opened up during this program. Down in Region 3, a little different approach. They had 5 counties down there and 50 permittees, and what we did down there was GFP went ahead and secured access with specific landowners, and then we paired up volunteer hunters with those landowners. For example, the first volunteer hunter A, he went to landowner B and hunted just on that landowner's property for the specific, or on those specific lands for the entire month of April. And the hope for that was really to encourage some landowner-hunter interaction, and hopefully there was maybe a possibility of a relationship being established between that hunter and that landowner, where perhaps that individual would be welcome back to hunt in the fall. So again, first time we've done this, wanted to try 2 different approaches and then if we decide to do something similar like this in the future, really evaluate which one worked better and try to apply that across the areas. So the results, obviously we had a real late spring, if you folks recall. Really, I'm going to call them poor hunting conditions, although it wasn't technically hunting. A lot of the same type of conditions out there and techniques that would occur with hunting. Harsh conditions, a lot of snow and ice. I talked to folks up in Day County well into the month of April. Those folks still had 20 inches of snow on the ground, and most of the water bodies were froze over. And then, of course, the 2013 ice storm in Sioux Falls hit as well. We had some anecdotal comments from some folks that said that they sure would have gone out, but with all the ice storm they had to take care of things at home and weren't able to get out there. So we had lower than anticipated participation. So what did we accomplish? Well, we harvested 820 Canada geese. Again, we authorized the take of 7,000. We were hoping for at least 50% success. But two things I want to point out there. Day County harvested almost 300 birds with 90 individuals. And down in Minnehaha County, where the weather was more conducive, we harvested almost the same number of birds with only 17 hunters. So again, just demonstrating that weather really did play an impact, particularly up in Day County. We also had a couple people that were concerned that with the late spring, a lot of migrants were still in South Dakota, that there was a chance that these individuals that were out there permitted would harvest some of the migrant geese that they're just passing through South Dakota, not the resident birds that set up shop and are causing damage. So we worked with different processors to weigh the Canada geese when they came in. They weighed these whole birds, and then based off the weight, would give us a real good idea if those birds were resident birds or migrant birds. I worked with Rocco Morano, our senior waterfowl biologist. He did a literature review and came up with basically that any bird that weighed 9 pounds or more could be considered a resident bird. And that's the number we used here. So we were able to harvest 76% of the total harvest, and we sampled birds both from up north in Day County as well as down south. So we've got a really good representative sample. And we ended up finding out that we did indeed harvest a significant number of resident birds, just as we had anticipated. We did do some additional educational material to the people that were selected, so those efforts paid off. So the final results, again, the 820 geese, way down from what we expected. Really difficult to evaluate the success of this program off of what our initial objectives were. The thought when we first started this program was to haze geese away from these problem areas, lower that population at a real local level, and then, of course, reduce the damage that occurs at these areas, which would in turn reduce our agency's efforts as far as expenditures to curb that damage. Some of the accomplishments, though, I do want to point out, we found that there really was a lot of strong public support, both from sportsmen and landowners. Talked to a lot of folks around eastern South Dakota and other areas, very supportive of this program. Had a lot of good positive comments from sportsmen's groups, so really happy to see that. Another accomplishment, we also had really good access to private lands. Almost all the landowners that we approached to open up these properties where we've been doing depredation work on in the past, for the most part, opened their doors to these hunters, so that was another good thing to see. We also learned that the Fish and Wildlife Service would actually allow us to use quote-unquote hunters underneath this permit to kill geese in the spring. And then we also can target specifically resident birds even when there's a significant number of migrants in the area. Hunters are pretty able to be selective and really target and key in on those resident birds. And then obviously Sportsmen Against Hunger was willing to work with us and the processors as well, so we could donate those birds, because under the permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service, all those birds that are harvested have to be donated to some food charity or charitable organization. So Sportsmen Against Hunger, that outlet worked really well for us. I think that's it. With that, I'd take any questions or comments. That's a photo somebody sent to me from a building down in the very southeastern part of Region 3 there. They got a complex that's nicely groomed lawns and have a large number of geese every year, and they had a pretty hasty one, I guess, right outside their door. So, any questions, I'd be happy.
Did we have an original goal on what you wanted to try to get harvested?
You know, Commissioner Cooper, we kind of put out a goal. We'd like to see at least 3,500 birds, 50% harvested. But, you know, we were just kind of shooting in the dark as far as what we really expected. So, all right, thank you.